Thank you so much, Mr. Chris, for joining us once again. The floor is yours. Please go ahead. The participants are waiting. They can't wait enough to hear you. Thank you once again. Good afternoon, everyone.
All right. Good afternoon, Babs, and thank you so much for this opportunity. When Babs phoned me a couple of weeks ago to ask me to come share on Outdoor Republic, I was like, geez, what do I know about this? What do I know about media? There are too many gurus of media who I'm sure are going to dial in. And so I thought really hard about it before giving him feedback that I could do it. But anyway, I do appreciate all of you for making the time this afternoon. I would really like to share some of my thoughts. And Babs gave me a topic which you see on your screen, media inclusion as a marketing catalyst in the VUCA world. I am, if you can see my next screen, it's a little bit about myself, but it's really quite lengthy, and I think he's introduced me, but I currently work for FrieslandCampina, WAMCO. I've worked with a few other multinationals before now. I've lived in Nigeria now for a little over, for 8 years exactly, working for both AB InBev and now FrieslandCampina. My wife and kids are out there, so if you hear any screaming and shouting, it's just my kids having a go at each other. I hope you can all hear me. Babs, if you don't hear me, if you can just prompt me so I know what that, but if you can hear me, please let me know. Okay. I
think you're very audible.
Type on the screen.
Yeah, go ahead. You're very audible. For the participants, if there's any itch along the way, free to type out in the chat room, and then so that we can know that you're following us. You can react from the chat room. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a lot of things to discuss today, and I'd like to start off with a quote, and you will find that I use quotes quite a lot in my presentations. That we're all here to learn. Plato was very, very clear about it. That learning is not, like we say in our local parlance, is not by force. So I believe everybody who is here is looking to learn something new. I learn something new every day, and I know with some of the conversations and the discussions we'll have, I will learn a lot as well. I am not a media expert, so I will not be able to do a comprehensive talk on the topic. I do rely on media partners for my own media at work, but I'm happy to hear your thoughts. It will be based on my personal experiences. They may not working for different companies along the way, but they may not be the views of those companies as it is today. So please pardon me if things have changed in these companies. It's just going to be used for the discussion purpose. And then a lot of my examples are going to be non-Niger examples, because I'm also a marketeer. I'm not sure, sometimes it's not appropriate to be over promoting other people's other brands and other businesses in this. So you will find that I will give you examples, but it may not be my competitors' examples, and I will stay clear of that. I will advertise some of my brands, please. So find out some of the pages, and you'll find some of my brands being showcased. I do not apologize for that at all, because I have a captive audience. Bob tells me that there's a number of people who will come, and I'm a marketeer every day in and out of work. So even though I'm working from home right now, I need to make sure people see and know about my brands. And then finally, I know the topic is about VUCA, and there's always a talk about VUCA, and we're in VUCA, but I dare say, and everybody's got a different opinion, it's always been our normal. We who have worked in this part of the world, we have always been in VUCA. That's what's been used to describe us. So whatever I share really will be something which, beyond COVID and the pandemic, will continue to live with us, or there will be principles which I presume will continue to be useful beyond the pandemic. So starting from that, I think we can all agree that the whole world is in VUCA, right? And since I can't see many people, I'm sure the reactions will be there. So Babs, if you nod, I will, because I've got the screen on. If you nod, I'll know you can hear me, and you can when I do ask these rhetorical questions. The whole world is in VUCA, and it makes you, you know, when you are in one place and you believe I can find refuge. If you look at the whole refugee crisis around the world, usually when people are being persecuted or being killed or being tormented in one place, they usually say, I'm going to find refuge somewhere else, right? But if you look at what this pandemic has taught us, is that, you know, if you leave where you are, there is no other place which is going to be significantly better than where you are right now. So you've got to be able to sort of find how to survive and how to live in your current environment. And that is really what I mean by the whole world is in VUCA, because there is no safe haven even in anywhere when it comes to this pandemic. Now, my next slide, I use this quote quite a lot. So please, apologies for those who have seen me use it before, but I still like to emphasize on it, which is the quote from Anthony Fauci, which, if you've heard me before, it says, you don't make the timeline, the virus makes the timeline. Now, it is what it is. To quote the person standing next to Anthony Fauci, it's that you can't do anything about it unless you are able to let it run its course. But you can also do certain things to make sure that the impact of it is not as bad for you. So a VUCA environment is not necessarily limited to Africa like it used to be in the past, or certain developing countries. This is the whole world. Now you've got the most powerful man in the world standing next to this guy, and he can't do anything about it, because the reality is that is what happens when a pandemic hits you with no vaccine and no cure and no solution in place. But I also like to quote the quote at the bottom, which says that there is always a silver lining in any dark cloud. Okay, so the WHO Director General said something really which I think we should all ponder on, which is the opportunity to come together as one humanity, to work together and to learn together and to grow together. Now, if it wasn't for the pandemic and VUCA, the number of Zoom calls and Zoom webinars we will be on will not be as much as what it is today. This particular webinar we are on, this Zoom webinar we are on, is actually facilitated by that. So I think we should all look at it and say, hey, maybe this is an opportunity to do a bit of a timeout to learn a little bit more from each other, because I believe that is extremely useful, and we believe that we need to rely on each other long after this pandemic has gone. So there is uncertainty, but I'm an optimist, and I'm sure most of you on the call are also optimists. But if you look at the word uncertainty, there's a certainty in every uncertainty, am I right? Which is called the human spirit, okay? It's called the human spirit. Usually when we are faced with so much adversity, the human spirit finds a way to cope. Some of it is making, you know, trying to get humor to sort of erode some of the pain and the anguish that comes with it. I just put a couple of the memes that have been going around with respect to where we are right now with the pandemic. You know, lots of people erase 2020 out of their annals of history, because it feels like, what happened to you? We were full of hope during 2020. And then you see these gentlemen, pallbearers. I don't know if you guys have seen them. They have this, if you're doing something dangerous, then they show up on the scene. I think there's a music that goes with it, you know? But it's all the way in which the human spirit copes with something that they have very little control of. And so it is also with business, okay? If you can see my screen now, I see there's a clear relationship between business purpose and the human spirit, especially in VUCA-defined times. Why do I say that? Because in good times, in bad times, businesses exist. And businesses exist only because there are consumers. The challenge or the question is, how do businesses move from one period of relative stability into a period of relative instability with that same consumer? It's like having a wife or a husband at home and navigating, when things are good and when things are bad. It's still the same people, but it takes a lot of attention and detail to be able to, and empathy and all the words you can think of to be able to navigate and get your way around that same consumer. So I would always like to start with a consumer. And for some people, they may say the customer if you're delivering a service, because at the end of the day, you have to, if you have a business, it must survive. And if it needs to survive, you've got to be able to figure out, what is it that I'm doing to enable my business survive. So Doreen Salami says, whoever is paying for your good and service. It doesn't matter whether it's an intermediary in between, but whoever is finally paying for that good and service is your consumer. And there is no business strategy in this world ever that doesn't have somebody paying for something which you either deliver or as a product or a service, deliver either as a product or a service. Are we on the same page? We're on the same page. Babs, if you can please nod, because this I'm just getting through the introductory. Good, thank you very much. So I started off with one of my disclaimers and say Nigeria has always been in the VUCA environment. This, I mean, it is part of our lives, so we usually don't complain that much. Yes, we do, but we get on with life. That is who we are, and that is what we do here in Nigeria. So yes, there is COVID, but we've also, as a result of COVID, have a price of the oil price going down globally across the globe, and it's also gone down for us. So whatever revenues we make out of oil, it's not as great anymore. We don't even, there was a period that we were actually below what our prices were below. The production price was higher than what the world was prepared to pay for our oil. So we've been through hard times. But in all these hard times, when you walk the streets, we've still got a smile on our face. We're still going about doing what we're supposed to do as Nigerian consumers. But it is part of the way we live. If you look at the rising Forex, the exchange rate, which has changed, and I think the CBN issued a statement a couple of days ago. But the real issue is that you can't even get enough Forex to use to transact business. Okay, I made this point at the Advan session the other day, that all these things, these 5 things which I have just noted here, these are the things, these are the conversations that take place within the client, who some of you may call the client, or my side I'll call business meetings. Okay, I've just come out of long meetings today where we are planning for next year, and we've got to figure out what exchange rates we're going to use to conduct our activities, what's going to happen to whether we can get Forex to import some of the things we need, etc. Whether or not if we needed to get some raw material, it will come out of the port early enough for us to be able to use it for what is required for. These are all conversations that I think as an industry of marketeers, we need to stay very close to. I think the marketing fraternity needs to elevate the conversations of how marketing influences decision-making when all of these things are happening around us. And I guess that's why we are on this program right now, trying to figure out, okay, so if all of this is happening in VUCA, what is our role? How does media get included, which I will get into a little bit later on in the conversation. So I'm sure we all recognize this man. I hope you can see my next screen. And with the picture I have painted, you come into this world, you have to fight your way to the end. Everything we do is you have to struggle. I've been following the US elections that are about to happen, and everybody seems to be up in arms. You know, Black Lives Matter, your fist is up in the air. Everything we do in this world lately, you've got to have a struggle mentality that I am in to win and I need to struggle. Even the EPL that we watch, now the players kneel on the ground and they show their solidarity to the struggle. So everything is a struggle because there is no easy walk to freedom, okay? And before we will pass through the shadow of death before we reach the mountaintop of our desire. We desire to have better lives and we desire to be happy because the ultimate currency of life is happiness. We all desire to be better than what we were before, but it can only happen unless there's a struggle. So how should marketers navigate this VUCA environment? And these are the questions that we keep asking ourselves. And I think at the last Advan conference, I talked about it a little bit. Because the evidence shows that after all is said and done, there will be some people who will lose and there will be some people who will gain, okay? This is something I picked up online about long-term, what's gonna happen to certain industries. And, you know, the question we ask ourselves is, you know, if I'm in an industry that is being estimated here to lose in the long term, what do I do? And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But the reality is that the consumer changes. The consumer's way of life changes. All of us have changed. I am working from home. I mean, I'm having a webinar with lots of people on, and I am working from home and I'm still trying to be as productive as possible. But I'm also at the back of my mind, when I'm about to leave home, always have to get my hand sanitizer and wash my hands and all of those things, because the reality is that COVID is still out there. So how do we make sure that as business people, we do not lose? And that I'll talk about it a little bit down the line. And if anybody's got a pressing question, please stop me so I can try and explain. Or maybe Babs, if any question comes up in the chat box, if you can just prompt me and then I'll answer and then continue. Please nod if you can hear me. Hello?
Hello, go ahead. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Okay.
You're loud and clear.
Very good. So very clearly, you know, we in the marketing fraternity, we need to be guided by what we do, okay? Our business purpose is really everything that guides what we do. And purpose does not mean what you do now. So for example, I work as a marketing director, but my purpose is not to be just a marketing director. My purpose is to really, what is it that makes me out? Okay, purpose is what you do for the greater good of humanity, not necessarily what you do just for yourself. Because if the purpose is only just for yourself, then when shocks come, because you are alienated and alone, you will not be able to live your purpose. And secondly, purpose must be for greater good. That's where you build the right capabilities that allow you to actually actualize that purpose. So we must all be guided by purpose. I work for an organization that is very interested in the nutrition of Nigerians. So whatever we do, whether we wake up in the morning or in finance, everything we do is geared towards that purpose. And most of it, that purpose is not just for us, it's for the greater good of all of Nigeria. So we must always think long-term because we are doing this for the long term. We must rekindle the basics in our vocation. And our vocation as marketing people is being close to the consumer, using the consumer as the main essence of any business strategy that we have. We must make sure that we are very close to be able to influence the decisions and actions of our businesses over time, okay? We must eliminate waste, obviously. I must say, some of the things that businesses are finding out lately is that, work from home, for example, if you have a big office complex, you don't need to switch off all the lights in the offices because people are at home. You save a little bit on electricity so you can provide more data airtime for your staff that's working from home. These are all trying to make sure that you eliminate waste. And that saving, you use it to feed your growth through this very difficult time, okay? So we must always continue to have an expansive mindset in this regard. So where are our consumers now? What are their concerns? What are they doing? I think it's important that if we as marketeers continue to stay close, these are the questions that helps businesses find them and therefore grow our businesses with our purpose in mind. In any VUCA situation, in any crisis, we are told that there are usually 3 phases, and I've seen different information talking about different 4 phases, 3 phases, 5 phases. But I'd like to talk about 3 phases, which is first when it comes out, or when we are first confronted with the situation, which we will call VUCA, which we may call uncertain, okay? For us in business, it is absolutely critical that in the first phase, because everything is so much in turmoil, make sure you're sustaining your short-term stuff, okay? Because you've got many stakeholders and you've got many, you've got a business purpose that must be sustained within the short term. You need to spend smarter, and if you are a marketer or you are a brand or a service that has to communicate with your audience, you make sure that your message is framed within the context of of the time you are in. I saw a video which I've shared a few times in the US, and if you look at advertising of different industries, everybody seems to be saying the same thing. And I've heard certain critics say, oh, it's boring, we're all saying the same thing. But there is a method to that madness. And the method to that madness of everybody saying the same thing, there is a message that must reassure that the consumer needs to hear. There is a message that needs to be couched in a certain way for the consumer to believe and then continue being part of your business, okay? And then the next phase is what we call recovery. So I see for us in Nigeria, we are easing our restrictions. So I think we are on the road to recovery. I certainly hope that we get to a point where, where everything is fully open and the rate of infections come down quite significantly. During this period, there's also quite a number of things that businesses must do. We need to find out different scenarios in which we play and find out what works best for us, because we've been in lockdown, we've been in situations where things are a little tighter, we've learned a little bit more about ourselves. So what are the scenarios? Obviously spending smart, and then anticipate what are the things that will shift permanently. So for example, are we still going to be working from home even after recovery? Well, you heard the Twitter CEO announce categorically that they will work from home. These are shifts that we must anticipate and start planning towards. And then obviously, when the new normal comes, just make sure you are as close to it. And I'm going to run through as quickly as possible, okay? Because we are marketers, we actually engage in communication. We are actually at the forefront of the connection between our businesses and consumers. And usually, agencies and partners are the glue that stick businesses and consumers together, okay? The message here is, do not think you know more than the consumer. Just listen, be you, okay? Do not say things that are not necessarily attributable to you. Don't try to be Mother Teresa when you've never had the traits of having empathy.
So sorry. Our guest, I'm sure his internet connectivity is going to log in back. Just give him a moment. He'll be back with us now. Sorry about that. That's internet connectivity. And he's logging in back. So just bear with him.
As a consumer base, consumers look up to businesses for direction. So when you're going through a tough time in the VUCA environment, businesses must empathize with consumers. You've got to be seen to be out there saying, I hear you, I see you, I understand the challenges you're going through. And it's very important that we do that, because when things get better, consumers will remember what you did for them when they were down. But we also have a responsibility to educate. And all that is going on around, with the virus, it's important that we actually spend a little bit of time to let our consumers know how it is to keep safe, keep healthy, and keep nourished during these times. We need to encourage. So, it's not only about selling or trying to drive our service down the throats of these consumers. We have to make sure that we encourage them through this period, because one of the things we know is mentally a lot of people are drained. But we also have to entertain, and we also have to make sure that we're not just being selective in who we talk to. Because like I said, the whole world is in VUCA. Everyone is in the same space. I use the example of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you actually move up from your physiological needs all the way up to self-actualization. I dare say, then the pandemic struck in most places, we all fell down to immediate safety and physiological needs. Everybody wanted to keep safe. That was most important and for all of us. I have colored the last point differently, because I'll talk a bit, is that because in one of my previous, I said there will be losers and winners. Nobody wants to lose. So it's important that you actually start assessing yourself as businesses and to evolve. You have to look at yourself and see that what capabilities and know-how do I have today, which will be useful for me in the future. What I do now in terms of my output as a business may not necessarily be the most required thing now. Now, I use the example of British American Tobacco. I'm sure most people will know, and if you don't know, maybe it's the first time you're hearing it, that they are one of the companies globally that is actively in the quest for a vaccine for COVID-19. Why? Somebody's going to say, why? How come? Because they looked at it and they realized we do have some capabilities, we do have some technology, we do have some know-how that enables us to be in this quest. And then you become relevant once again. Because in the heat of a pandemic, a lot of people gave up smoking because everybody wanted to be healthy. Okay, gave up smoking, but they realized very quickly, and they are in this, I don't know how it will work out for them. If you look at GE, they were very actively in the forefront in the delivery of ventilators and whatnot, okay? Because their biggest part of their business was, delivering jet engines to the airline industry. That was gone. So the point I'm making is, do not say because I am here to provide jet engines, when things change, I don't change to go with it. You've got to be able to say, what is my capability, and use that to navigate a path for you. But it's also dependent on how you have shaped your purpose in that way to give you leeway to be able to do some of these things. I am moving very swiftly into why we're here and growth and media and all of that. I'm sure you've all heard about the philosophy of how brands grow, which is really what my personal belief in businesses and growth of businesses now. And that has, a very simple way of explaining that penetration is the route to sustainable growth for any business. So in the past, we used to do segmentation, targeting, whatever. It's still valid. But those days where we used to focus on only loyal consumers to drive the biggest part of growth of a business, with this principle, you need to target everybody, okay? Where it says, I've got to build the mental knowledge of my business, and then make sure that when consumers want to buy or when they need access to use my business or my service, I am available. How do I make them available, or how do they get to see me? Is through the recognizable distinctive assets that I have. And this guiding principle of how brands grow is really what I work with on a daily basis right now. And if some of you haven't heard about it, which I'm sure most of you have, it's there's a book by Byron Sharp that you can look out for that tells you some of these principles, and it will help your businesses to navigate growing during these very, very difficult times. And it transcends beyond difficult times as well. If you look at the 7 rules for brand growth that it says in this book, I've already mentioned continue to reach all buyers of the category, not just those who buy you or the loyal people. You know, ensure your brand is easy to buy, get noticed, refresh and rebuild memory structures, be consistent, etc. If we look at all of these, there's a media consideration in each of these seven rules, which means that media plays an important role in how business grows, okay? So if recruiting all buyers is important to you to grow your business, how do you get to all of these buyers? Because you can't go to each and every one of them on a personal selling platform. You've got to go through the use of media. So media is key. Now, I take this slide, this is like a pause slide for me so I can have a little bit of water and then come back to the rest of the conversation. Any questions at this time? How are we doing, Bob?
I mean, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat room ahead of the question and answer segment. It's an unpaid media exposure period for. I
told you I've got people who are listening and watching me.
The truth of the matter is that my guest had already bared it out ahead of this session that as a marketeer, he cannot but push his brand. So it's allowed today. So I'm sure some of you've had your 3 crown milk today. All right, so questions will keep rolling, but I think question and answer time, we'll deal with that. You can continue, yeah, thanks.
All right, I'll continue. So very quickly, it says the only strategy or customer or competitor sees in the marketplace is what you execute. And I think that's what we do on a daily basis. When I walk out there and I'm going to work and I see what I see, what I hear, what I listen to, what comes to my phone, tells me a lot about what businesses are doing and therefore what I should be doing. And it gives me an insight in what strategy companies are using to grow their businesses at this point in time. If we look at Nigeria, we're a very diverse country. We've got some very rich people, but we've also got some very poor people. Now, when I'm going to work and I'm thinking about if I have to reach all the consumers in Nigeria, I've got to be able to start thinking of what is my media mix, which I have to use to reach everybody. We sell quite a lot of our products that we produce up north, but I know that in some of the places, rural places, they don't have access to all the digital media that I can lay my hands to. So some traditional media comes in. So it's really about how you juggle the mix to make sure you reach everyone, which is one of the E's that I talked about. Make sure we're educating, we're empathizing. So there is no what do you call it? Either traditional or digital. I think it's a mixture, a mixed bag of all that we use. And in selecting the media, it is important to note that not everything has to say everything, but everything has to be said. So when I select, say for the sake of argument, outdoor, which is really what this program or your magazine is all about, outdoor can only give me up to a point. I've got to be able to add on and add on and add on. But what I'm saying here is like preaching to the choir. So I will move on from there. But I think for us as practitioners, it is really what we do in the background. It's how we conduct these choices that we make, because it involves selection, it involves resources, and money involves things like reach and how you want your messages to reach out there to different consumers and different target groups. At the end of the day, you want to maximize what you do. But how do you do that? And I actually read out the quote of a famous conductor who says that one of the most important elements of teaching, conducting, and performing, all three, is about listening. Do we listen enough, or we think we know? And this is where we have to use all the information that becomes available to us, either through I know because I was there, so let's spend time out with our consumers in their own environment, or we get specific data or research from credible sources to help guide how we conduct media going forward. And also media inclusion should be guided by, after you've gone there, should be guided by the right insights on whether consumers are both mentally, because at this point in time, it's either COVID or Black Lives Matter, or because people are at home, they're looking for cooking tips. We need to know all of this. What's going on in the mind of these consumers? Where are they? How are they feeling? And all of that. But also physically, which is where outdoor comes in, okay? And this is the mobility analysis report that shows you where people were at the beginning of the lockdown, and you can see we are coming back to a state of normalization all over again. So mentally and physically, we need to know where the consumer is so that we can target them. It's also important that we stay close to technology. And I think my being on this platform, speaking to you from my home and reaching as many of you with the help of technology is brilliant. And I think most companies will admit that if it wasn't for COVID, they wouldn't have fast-tracked some of their digital enablement that they are doing at the moment. This is a picture of my team, and I brought it up because I felt, even as we are working from home in different areas, this is a picture of my team and our consumers. We actually still chat to our consumers via these type of technology, on WhatsApp calls, on Zoom, still wanting to get closer to them than ever before. Then we need to recognize the redefinition of the media owner. Gone are the days where TV, you put your ads on TV and then that's it. You can go to bed because the reach is so huge and all of that. The little young lady on the left is my daughter. She's 14, She lives her life on TikTok and Snapchat and all of that stuff. Some of her stuff goes all the way around the world and comes back, and I kind of go, geez, I wish when I was her age, I had access to this level of technology. But in that space, she owns her space. And if businesses want to be part of it, we've got to start understanding how this works. So I'm getting to the last bit of my presentation. I think I promised Babs I'd spend about 45 minutes and then the rest for questions. And since Outdoor Republic is an outdoor, I thought I'd give some thoughts, my own thoughts on outdoor. So my views, outdoor is good. I've always been a good proponent of outdoor. I mean, my media manager will say, Chris is going to ask me, where's our outdoor located around the country? Because I believe that, it's probably one of the simplest, most effective media available to us now, because we're still out there. Yes, there's growth in digital technology, but there's also growth in digital outdoor and all the things we can do with it. So it's a nice fusion of the tenets of outdoor with the modernity and the evolution of technology. I think that for us in Nigeria, we need to continue to remain, we need to stay cognizant to how we use outdoor. And I've taken two examples, and I look at the one on the left, for instance, which is a Dove campaign which ran some years ago. Showing what we do is taking the cultural nuances in the country to sort of make sure that we do not offend, rather than we should use it to espouse some of the things that we are doing. But I think the Dove campaign worked pretty well in the environment that it did. What I don't know is whether the same campaign will work in this part of the world. But I also think that there's a little bit of simplicity that comes with outdoor that we must continue to look for, because if the creative is great and it's simple, the benefit far outweighs how much time we spend to get to it. I'm not going to go through all these other thoughts. I think maybe preaching to the church, but there are some things I've always lived by with respect to what outdoor does for you when you're making choices in this environment. Finally, I'm going to end on a couple of quotes. This is from the book, The Case for Creativity, and it says, media in itself makes an audience a possibility, but not a certainty. 1,000 people passing by a billboard is not an audience. The true audience is the number of people who actually notice and engage with it, and is around the quality of the idea. So I make the point about great creative work when it comes to outdoor, or when it comes to any other media. So I work with a number of advertising agencies, and we've got some really clear rules of what we want to do. We want to make sure when we are evaluating any creative, we have some set standards. And then we also have a set standard with regards to how we, as an agency and client, how we're supposed to work to make sure that the stuff we put out there raises the bar of the entire industry, rather than goes in to just add on to the pile of what I call cliched work or wallpaper work out there. And I think as an outdoor industry, and with a magazine like Outdoor Republic, you are doing your bit already to raise the profile of this thinking. And I think businesses and marketeers like us have a role to play in making sure that it is elevated. So my final thought is from a former CMO of Coke in the USA, who did amazing work, but he also was one who's attributed to one of the biggest failures of Coke in the USA. And he is humble enough to say that, the future of marketing lies in establishing it as a professional discipline that is based on sound business results. So in all the speaking that I've done in the last 45 minutes or so, if we use everything that we are doing, and we all agree on the principles and all that we need to do to navigate VUCA and the environment we are in, if it doesn't translate into business results, then our discipline as marketeers lies in jeopardy. And I think we all have a responsibility to make sure that we are continually raising the bar in what we do, and ensuring the future of marketing as a discipline. So with that, I say thank you very much. Questions?
Thank you so much, Chris. We really, really appreciate your insightful sharing today. So we are now at the question and answer segment. Some questions are already in the chat room. So like I said, those questions, I'll read them out to you one after the other.
Sure.
Again, for participants here, if you want to ask live question, with the permission of the guest, you might be allowed to. But in the meantime, if you've got questions, put them in the chat room, and then we can all read through the chat room questions, you and I, Chris. Those questions are there. If you click on the chat down there, I think the first one that I can see here is coming from Freeman Ahibe. He says, why do advertisers drop spend in times of crisis when in theory is the best time to spend?
Can I go ahead with that?
Please do, please do.
Oh, all right. And the first name of the person, what was it again?
Freeman.
Freeman. Okay, I'll address him as Freeman. Freeman, thanks. Thank you very much. It's a very insightful question. And I believe this is not the first time that I've encountered this question. And if you look at business as a whole, advertising spend is an investment. You've got to be generating business and a revenue stream to be able to invest behind your business, okay? Now, when revenue streams get affected by the environment or this VUCA as we're talking about, you've got to start looking at some of the things that you can cut. Yes, I agree with you. If you're going to be thinking long-term, you should not be disinvesting in your brands in times when things are tough. But the reality is sometimes it gets to a point that there's no money to put behind a brand. It's not because businesses don't want to, but sometimes you cut it to the bare bone. And if you look at, when you take the revenue stream and you've taken out your cost of goods sold, which is production or whatever, how you conduct your business, and then you start taking out your investment behind your brand, you start realizing that the next thing you'd have to do is start to let people go home. And the counter to that is, okay, let me take a little bit of money out of the investment I put behind brand. So sometimes there's a real consideration. It is not an automatic cut in marketing or advertising spend when things are tough, but sometimes it gets to that point. My counter charge is that marketing as a discipline should not only be seen as I need money to conduct marketing. If you look at the basics of marketing, you've got 4 Ps or 6 Ps or whatever it is, am I right? You've got your product, you've got your place, you've got all of those are part of marketing. But I find that a lot of the time, the fine P, what I call the fine P, the promotion P, we all seem to gravitate toward that P. But marketeers must look at your product, your service. How do I work, because I understand the consumer so much, how do I work with the business to sort of take cost out of it so that the consumer can continue enjoying and I can generate a bit more revenue to be able to fund advertising? So those are some of the things that when it gets to this point and your fine P or your promotion P is going to get affected, get involved in the conversations around the rest of the P in the organization that you're in. Pricing, are you in the right place? Are you well distributed? Do you have enough access to your consumers? And let's be careful we don't fall into a trap where it always has to be about the advertising spend. And I know I'm speaking to, there are some agency people here because it affects the revenue streams of agencies. And I understand that, but it's part of working in this environment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. So the next question that is here is from Oluwafemi Ogundoro. It says, please, first, thank you for the session. Then it says, please, what media do you consider the most effective, especially in a country like Nigeria during a pandemic such as this?
Thank you, Oluwafemi. All media is effective. Let me start off by saying that media choice is only a function of where your consumer is, like I said in my presentation, where your consumer is at a time, either physically or mentally. Now, if my consumer is stuck at home and only has access to their phone or the TV, my media choice, my most effective media choice during the pandemic will be the phone and the TV. If the consumer has no choice, if my consumer I'm trying to reach has no choice but to be out there in terms of maybe it's a healthcare worker or is a security service or whatever it is, say assuming that's what I'm into, medical stuff or healthcare stuff, I still have to use things like outdoor because the consumer will still commute to work and all of that. So it's really about when and where you want to reach that consumer that you're targeting. I do know that we had really high spikes of certain usage of certain media during lockdown, simply because of where people were at that point in time. But I am very cautious not to say that, so therefore that is the most effective. No, I think it's place and time and circumstances determine what is most effective.
Thank you so much for that response. I think the other question here is from Oluwadare. He also thanked you, and he says he's a TV producer. What is your professional advice on how to sell a viable product to an advertiser like Friesland in a vocal environment?
Oh, thanks, Oluwadare. So let me just assume that you have a property that you want to sell to FrieslandCampina. I think the first thing is to understand the business of what FrieslandCampina does. What do they do? Who do they talk to? How do they reach them currently? Is it being affected? You've got to craft whatever you're trying to sell in the manner that makes it, it's a bit like what I do on a daily basis, that you craft your property or your asset that you're trying to sell in the manner where Friesland believes that if I don't have this, I will lose out. No business wants to lose out to the competitor. So you've made enough inquiry, you've actually got insights into the eventual consumer that Friesland will be using that property for. And you are able to push your argument across that, hey, Chris, if you don't take this property from me, you know, you will lose out. And I think those principles are very important, but it has to be backed up by real facts and real knowledge of what you are doing, as well as some knowledge of what you believe Friesland is trying to do.
All right. Thank you so much. Another question here is from Felix. He's also thanked you for your presentation. His question is, he says, I would like to know your take on outdoor advertising and activation, especially in a VUCA situation.
Okay.
So I think it's lumping up out of home as well as activation.
Experiential.
Yeah.
Yes. I think, and you saw the location analysis that I shared, that, you know, just like in businesses, I showed the tourism industry was struggling, but health and pharmaceuticals was up. Depending on what is happening with consumers and the population at a point in time, some media becomes, the relevance of some media outweighs others, okay? And I would think that at some point in time, during, let's say, a lockdown, you know, the relevance of overt out of home and outdoor solutions goes down a little bit because investment goes into other media. And so it is with experiential. Experiential is actually is actually been hit harder because of social distancing. You know, experiential requires contact. You've got to go be in an environment with a consumer and or a program or you're sampling. And so I do know that it hasn't been an easy time for companies who are in experiential and to an extent companies who are in outdoor. But what I do know is that, and it comes down to when I talked about purpose, that when each of you is defining your purpose as a business, the narrower you make your purpose, the tougher it is to actually use the capabilities that you will develop to navigate your way out of a pandemic. Now, I say this because I used the example of British American Tobacco in one of my slides. I say this because, you know, if you're an experiential, you would have built certain capabilities which have built proximity between you and the consumer with the brand as a catalyst. I think there are still some capabilities in there that you can still look at with respect to trying to still be relevant to business beyond just your experiential agency. And so you've got to be able to figure out, okay, I understand what's going on. These are the options of things I can do because I've already built up this capability. If I take outdoor, for instance, and I'm just thinking wildly because I'm not an outdoor expert, but I think if there's not enough investment going into outdoor because everybody's on lockdown and there's not enough, how do outdoor businesses use their media channel to be able to influence business? Maybe there's a way in which the channel can be used for more social advocacy, in which case businesses want to be seen to be involved in that social advocacy rather than selling brands. You know, so those are some of the things that if the conversations are right between agencies and business, we can find a use of how we use some of these things for the benefit of both parties when the time is right.
All right, thank you so much. There's another question from Udofia. He actually sent it to me privately, but I put it in the chat room for everyone to see. He says, during the pandemic, how do you ensure that your route to market is effective and efficient? What will you do to ensure that the product gets to the consumers even with movement restrictions? I guess it's now speaking to the P, which is the place right now.
True. Udofia, thanks for the question. I think it was probably, if I recall my experiences from this year, it was probably the most revolutionary thing that we had to go through as a business. And I'm sure most businesses had to do that. Simply because I talked about, you know, penetration is the trigger or the tool for growth, but you need mental availability and physical availability to be able to work hand in hand. Now, consumers know about your brand, but they can't access it because markets are closed, shops are closed, whatever it is. But you have to be able to find a way to get products and services closer to consumers. So, for example, route to market, we work in an environment where you know the route to market is quite diverse and is dependent on you know open markets and proximity. With everybody being at home, nobody wanted to go too far off from their homes to be able to access the things that they need to be able to live. So you need to find a way of getting products closer to consumers' homes. We had to find a way of doing that in various channels. We had to find a way of using technology to enable this getting products closer to homes, using platforms that hitherto we didn't find or were not as big in our business have now become much bigger and much more important because of the changes in the dynamics of the consumer. It's the same thing when I was explaining media channels. The route to market also has to talk to where the consumer is at any point in time. So very, very similar dynamics. We had to change a lot of things to be able to survive. Now, imagine that we had built our route to market on, as for us, we will only sell in open markets, which is, we are business designed for that. That means we wouldn't have built any capabilities which would allow the change or which will allow the evolution that we're talking about. So you've got to leave room in whatever you do so you can build capabilities that allow you to survive when things change out there in the market. And I think I'm saying this I may sound like a broken record when I'm saying it, but I've also find that it's good to have that in your personal life where you say, I am so good with this, I'm going to focus on it. Now, I was explaining to someone this morning that I love to be in the kitchen to cook, which I'm sure will surprise a few people in the audience. But I found out that when lockdown came, I couldn't go out enough. EPL was cut short, so I couldn't watch the thing that I love the most, which is football. My kids were hogging everything in the house. I ended up going into the kitchen a whole lot more. You develop another thing that keeps you going. It's the same with capabilities in business. You've got to be able to figure out that so when things change, you know exactly what to rely on as a capability.
All right. Thank you so much. At this point, we don't have any other question typed out in the chat room. So if you oblige, there's something that we do towards the end of every session that we have. First, we ensure that we enable audio as well as video for all participants. This is so that participants can make facial contacts with our guests, and our guests can also feel comfortable that we haven't arranged fictitious names that are real faces behind those names. So we've gotten to that point where we would accept that people can ask their questions, making facial contact, and then also express their appreciation to you for the time that you have spent. You earlier told me before this session that you would love to leave just a few minutes on top of the hour, and then we are right there now. We are done almost, it's almost 10 minutes after 5. So we wouldn't want to take so much of your time. So everyone, you're free to enable your videos. But again, as you enable your video, still remain muted. Don't release your audio so that we can have some sanity around here in terms of noise, and we can control the noise. So enable your video and make facial contact with our guest, who has been so magnanimous with his time with us today.
Thank you.
Show your appreciation, wave of hands. And if you still want to ask a live question, then you would be allowed to unmute yourself, and then you can ask that live question. But in the absence of any live question and all that, Chris, we want to thank you so much for making our time to be with us at Outdoor Republic Live today. Our shout out also goes to all of you. Without all you guys joining us today, there will be no Outdoor Republic Live. And I'm glad that people are still enthusiastic to learn. And, so we appreciate all of you. We also appreciate our sponsors that have been supporting us, Ocean Outdoor Limited and Nimbus Media. They've been there from day one, supporting this live session that we've been holding. So we thank you all very much. I can see that we are okay with today. Chris has done wonderfully well as regards the topic, being a great marketeer himself, an experienced one for that matter. We thank you so much for your time. In the house here today, you've got quite a number of people. We have approximately about 60 to 70 participants. For those that have been able to show their faces, we appreciate you. We would have loved all of you. I love the situation where all of you can show your faces, but it's all right. Thank you so much once again. We have come to the end of the session. You can just, by way of parting words to all our participants today, now that you can see their faces and then you can make facial contact. So your last parting words for today's session.
All right, thanks, Babs. First of all, thank you, Babs, and the Outdoor Republic organization for inviting me here. And I hope I was able to share a little bit of, my own personal experiences during this period. I just pray that, or say that during this time, we're all, like I did mention, when you look at the Maslow's hierarchy, we're all very much striving to live and survive and not be affected by what is going on. And I think my advice or my personal parting words to everyone is take good care of yourselves personally, both mentally and physically. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay nourished, and stay connected with your loved ones all around you. We will get through this, I believe so strongly, because Nigeria the carry last. So thank you very much for your time, and I enjoyed being with you.
Thank you so much. Everyone, you can unmute yourself right now and then give a shout out to Chris. Unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Shout out very much.
Thank you
so
very
much, boss.
For your presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, boss.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, boss. We appreciate. Thanks. Very insightful moment.
Well done, Babs. Well done, Chris.
Hey, well done, Babs. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Appreciate you all. It's been a wonderful session today. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you.
All right. Come to the end of the session. Bye, everyone. So we meet again next time. Bye.
All right. Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.
Bye, Dada.
All right. Bye.